Welcome to Beyond the Blend, the podcast that goes behind the science and talks to the people at the heart of the lubricant market, telling the real story of the people who make the lubricant market move. With real insight and honest conversations, we aim to show off the people's side from across the entire lubricant supply chain. Join me, Steve Knapp, and Rob Taylor as we delve behind the scenes of the lubricant industry. Let's go. Okay, so let's kick off with our famous 5 from 5 with our guest today. Question 1, Jim. Factory floor or boardroom?
Factory floor.
Early start or late finish? Or both, I guess.
No, early start.
Precision engineering or creative problem solving?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm kind of half and half on that.
We'll come back to that. Military discipline or entrepreneurial freedom?
Military discipline.
We'll come on to that one as well. And finally, old school handshake or digital connections?
Old school handshake.
Yeah, good stuff. Jim Carroll, thank you very much for joining us. Please just take a moment to introduce yourself, where you're joining us from, who you are, the business you run.
Well, Jim Carroll, I'm in St. Louis, Missouri. I'm the executive vice president of a company called Schaeffer Manufacturing. We were started in 1839. It was a rendering company that made soap and candles, oil and grease. The oil went on the steamboats that went up and down the Mississippi and the Missouri, and the grease went in the wagon wheels and went west. So St. Louis is called the gateway to the west. This was the last port of embarkation for a lot of the settlers that went west, came to St. Louis on riverboat, and then some went up the Missouri for a while, but a lot actually started their land journey across the plains and into California from here. So, and Nicholas Schaeffer was a German chemist and started the company. He had a partner, and they not only did they own a soap and candle rendering plant, but they also owned a brewery, and it was called the Bavarian Brewery. Well, the partner, his daughter got married, and so he came to Nicholas and said he wanted to get out of he wanted to buy Nicholas out of the brewery. And he wanted to take his son on as a partner. That was Eberhard Anheuser, and his son was Augustus Busch. So Anheuser-Busch was actually a spinoff of Anheuser-Schaeffer candle, soap, and lubricant manufacturer. So yeah, we've got a copy of the stock certificate with the signatures on it and everything like that. It's kind of cool. But anyway, that's kind of where Schaeffer started. Just a very old, traditional family-owned company, still family-owned, 6th generation. And I'm the executive vice president. I do a lot with operations, tech support, product technology, strategic planning. I don't do much in the admin finance world, but just about everything else, I kind of get to touch in one way or another.
Yeah. Oh, fabulous. Well, thank you for taking time out to speak with us today. I mean, I'm really fascinated to get to know more about your story, because some listening in may not know, but you're currently the brand new, at time of recording, ILMA president. So I'm looking forward to understanding more around your purpose and desire around that. A couple of things struck me there from that introduction there, Jim. 1839.
Yes.
And a brewery. So which bit piqued your interest most when you first got introduced to Schaeffer?
Well, I was a customer. I was a maintenance general foreman at Granite City Division of National Steel. I kind of knew National Steel in particular, but the steel industry wasn't going to be a long-term good place for me to work. So I started sending resumes out. My sales rep heard about it and let the VP of tech at that time know, hey, Jim Carroll looking for a job. So I was contacting me and said, hey, don't take a job until you talk to us. And so, well, I'm going to take the first good job offer I get. So you guys better start talking. Well, they did. And as I learned more about Schaeffer and the company and the family, the more I knew it was aligned with what I wanted and what I did. And so it was kind of a no-brainer to jump over as a technical support engineer. That was in 1998 when I started. Been happy ever since.
Yeah, that's 1998 for me. What we're now, back into 2025. It seems like yesterday, but that's 27 years ago.
Yeah. A lot of water under the bridge.
Yeah, literally generations ago. It's crazy. And have you always been in St. Louis? Jim, or have you moved around?
I mean, other than my home of record has always been in St. Louis, other than the military service. And when I went to college in a town called Kirksville, Missouri. It's about 30 miles south of Iowa, way up north of here. There's nothing between there and the North Pole but a barbed wire fence. And we, yeah, we knew it every winter. There's nothing to do up there but go to school, party, hunt, and fish. So I was in heaven there, I tell you.
There could be worse things to do.
Oh yeah, let me tell you.
And what was young Jim's life like? What was growing up in St. Louis like back in?
Well, my my father was a police officer. My mother was a teacher. So you can imagine I had a pretty strict upbringing. Even so, I still managed to get in trouble. One of the things I used to get in trouble doing was, I was always curious as a kid. I always wanted to know how stuff worked. And so my dad had a rule. I could use any tool I wanted as long as I put the tool back when I was done. So I was like 10 or 11 years old, and I started pulling appliances out of the trash, small appliances out of the trash, take them apart, see how they worked. And that was always fun. And I tried to put them back together again, and that was cool. And I thought, you know what would be really good is if I took a working appliance, took it apart, put it back together, and made sure it worked again, right? The first time I wasn't real successful. So I was a little trouble on that one, but I still remained curious about, how stuff worked. And I guess typical, played sports, soccer, football for you guys, basketball, baseball, that kind of a thing. Swam. I was in Boy Scouts, just typical, leave it to Beaver kind of house, but a lot of fun.
I'm similar to you in some respects, whereas I'm great at taking things apart or knocking things down. It's the putting them things back together.
That's the challenge. My wife gives me trouble about it because, when I get something, some appliance or some piece of furniture you got to put together, I'm pretty strict about the directions. If I have leftover parts, I get just absolutely aggravated, figuring out where did I go wrong? What happened here? I got to go back and figure out where
this one screw from. Which one screw?
Exactly. Was this an extra screw? Let me count. Let me see. It was supposed to be 10 in here. I put 8 in and I got one left over. Oh, wait, I dropped one and I missed one. I mean, what the heck?
You see, when I get flat back furniture or something at home, the last thing I do is look at the instructions. I just tear the box open. I get all the bits out. I lay it out as I think it should be. And then when it goes wrong, it's someone else's fault.
I start with the directions, and then a lot of times I get halfway through and get aggravated because I wouldn't have written the directions that way. So then I start doing it the way I would have thought to do it, So
it's the instructions that are wrong. Damn them.
That's right. That might be more telling of our testosterone level, right? I mean, that's a typical male response to that kind of a thing.
Exactly. Well, it's good to know your passion for engineering, manufacturing, fixing things was started from a young age. I mean, Jim, at some point, am I right in thinking you moved into military service as well? It'd be great to understand what enticed you into that field.
It was one of those things when I was a kid. I was always fascinated with the military. And like I said, I was in Boy Scouts, and then I went to an all-boys Catholic military high school. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I'm still friends with the guys I went to school with. Some of the teachers even still talk to me. So, it was it was a lot of fun. But you can imagine, having a whole bunch of high school aged teenage boys. It wasn't an overnight. I mean, we went home it was a day school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But boy, we still managed to get in trouble. I mean, it was.
If you're a teenage lad and you can't get in trouble, you're doing something wrong.
It was nothing. It was never malicious. It was more mischievous, right? I mean, we were just we were good at pranks. We were good at just doing stuff like that. Anyway, but it was a military high school, and I'd always been involved in the military or interested in the military. And then, so when I graduated from high school, I went and got an ROTC contract, and so I was an ROTC through college and then commissioned in 1982. Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody that you would talk to when I was growing up, none of them were surprised that I went into the military. So, Just kind of
Have
who
you got
I am.
family history there in the military as well? 'Cause you
Well,
say your dad was
yeah,
a policeman, and
yeah. He was in the Army before he was a police officer. He was one of seven. He had four brothers, and all four brothers were either in the Navy or the Army. And so, it's just, and then, his my grandfather was in World War One. I had a couple great uncles on my mother's side that were in World War One as well. So it was just, it was just kind of the thing you did, I guess, in my family when you're growing up.
so did you see it almost like as a rite of passage to getting old? Was it always your long-term view to stay in the military, or is I'm going to go in, do my thing, and leave?
No. I really thought that I was going to stay a career officer on active duty for 20 something years. But I met my wife, and she had other ideas. So I went in the reserves, which was kind of a good compromise. And so I got off active duty, and I went in the reserves and stayed in the reserves. I got called up in 90 for Desert Storm, came home in 91. Then I went to get back in the reserves. And like I said, I started working here at Schaeffer. And then in November of 2003, I got called up for Iraq, spent a year in Iraq, came back like August of 2005. And then I went, stayed in the reserves, became a battalion commander, got promoted to full bird colonel. And I had a general tell me when I got off active duty after Iraq, he said, well, as soon as you get promoted, you're going to be back on active duty. And I said, well, I'll take that chance, sir. Do what we got to do. So, yeah, I was selected for promotion in February of 2008. I was promoted in June of 2008. In August of 2008, I was back on active duty. And in November of 2008, I was in Afghanistan. So, and then I stayed on active duty almost till I retired, until October of 2011, and then retired in May of 2012. I had 30 total years of service, both active and reserve. So.
Oh wow! Wow!
Yeah.
Wow! What a tale! What a story! I mean, what's it
Long
like?
road,
I mean, I vaguely remember. So I was born in '84. So I vaguely remember the first. What was it? Desert Storm? Was it in 1990?
Yep. Desert
Did you
Storm.
know you were getting called up, or was it almost like? Did you have like a few weeks to prepare?
Good story
or
there.
What does that look like?
So I was working I was a company commander, and I was working at the steel mill, and I got a phone call. I was on midnights, and I was getting off work, and one of my full-timers called and says, hey, sir, there's a lieutenant colonel here from the Department of the Army. He's got on Class A's, and he's looking at our readiness report. And he's checking our readiness report against, he's looking at vehicles and whatever. And this was November. And I just kind of like, okay, put him on the phone. So, hey, sir, Jim Carroll, company commander. Anything I can do to help you? He goes, no, appreciate the call, but I'm good here. I'm seeing everything I need to see. You don't need to worry about coming in. I said, okay, great. So I went home and I was rehabbing a house. And there was like one last thing I had to do, right? This one piece of crown molding was kind of tricky to put up. And I got home and I was like, okay, I'm not going to go to bed. I'm going to get this crown molding done. So I'm up there, I'm working on it. And finally I got it done. I had it in place, finishing it up, caulking it up. And my wife comes up. She's a teacher. So she comes home and she looks at it. She says, you're going, aren't you? And I said, yeah, I think I probably am. She goes, yeah, that's the only way you get that damn thing finished. So that was in November. We got notified at the end of that month. And then December 3rd, we were actually called up and then on our way. So, yeah.
Wow. And how long were you on the ground for on that first stint?
6 months. Yeah, so 6 months. We got there just before the ground war kicked off. So participated in that aspect of it, and then helped cleaning up and doing some other things, and then came home in May of that year. So yeah.
And help me understand the sort of ranking, because you got to colonel, right? So
yes.
So where did you start from? You said commander, and then
I was a second
how many
lieutenant.
steps up?
Second lieutenant, then first lieutenant. Second lieutenant, first lieutenant, I was a platoon leader. I was an armor officer, armored cav officer, and tanks, run tanks around, drive. You say drive fast and break stuff. That was a lot of fun. But I did that. And then when I got in the reserves, I went to a maintenance company. And so I was a maintenance company commander. So instead of driving the tanks, I was fixing them. And I was a company commander in Desert Storm. And then, I got promoted after that, major, then lieutenant colonel. When I was in Iraq in 2004, I was a lieutenant colonel. And then got promoted to full bird colonel. And that's when I went to Afghanistan. I was a full bird colonel. I was a deputy commander for a brigade for RC South, which was Kandahar and Helmand Province. The British were the primary force over in Helmand Province, and the Canadians were the primary force over in Kandahar. We were going to put a bunch of U.S. in, and so I was one of the first U.S. guys to go into Kandahar, and I set up for receiving the equipment, receiving and processing, and then issuing the equipment that the troops would need, when they got there for the big buildup in 08 and 09.
It's an incredible journey. What did they see in you to promote you so far? Because that's a lot of rungs up the ladder. So
yeah,
was it your ambition? Did you keep saying, "Look, promote me, chief, give me a promotion," or were you just talent spotted? Yeah. How does that work in the army?
No good deed goes unpunished. Is how it goes. I just, I always took. I never hesitated to take an assignment that was challenging and difficult. And like one of the questions you asked me earlier, or something else we were talking about, is I love fixing stuff, right? So same thing. You give me a challenge, and I just I kind of let's see what this thing looks like. Let's see what we can do with it.
So, take a bike apart as well. You can take a tank apart.
That's it.
I guess, right?
That's it. That's right.
They all go back together again eventually. Yeah.
Yeah.
But what does it teach you about
sometimes they work.
Yeah, exactly. Every now and then it might work, right? What does it teach you about yourself, Jim? In those early days when you're in like Desert Storm, for example, there must be some lessons there for yourself, for your mindset. I mean, what does it teach you about you?
You don't have any problem with confidence, I'll tell you that. You just kind of realize, if you got to do something, you can do it. You just kind of got to want to do it, figure out you want to do it, figure out what you're going to do, and then go after it, So that's like when you asked me about precision engineering versus creativity. If it's stupid and it works, it wasn't stupid, right? So, sometimes you got to, say, okay, well, here's what we need to do. Here's what the intent is. Here's what I want to get done. I don't have a rule book or a playbook to follow on that one. There are no IKEA directions. All right, let's go. Let's figure this out, guys. Let's get it done.
And I guess it must be frustrating at times, is it? Coming from the military service into what do you call it, Civvy Street? It's the attitude, the mindset must be so challenging for you when you're just like, look, guys, just get it done, and people just like, well, I will.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it's frustrating. So sometimes I get aggravated with I call analysis by paralysis. Patton said, an 80% plan violently executed is better than 100% plan non-executed, right? So, maybe you have an 80% solution and you're not going to get to 100% solution, but you have the 80% solution and you got to get started now. So just go do it. And, that 20% is going to fall out, or, we used to say no plan survives enemy contact intact. You're going to have to change the plan anyway. So it doesn't matter. Just, what the intent is. You got a pretty good plan to start. Let's go. And then let's see what happens. And we'll go from there.
And then so I'm just trying to get my timelines right here. You left Afghanistan and then went to work. You were working for Schaeffer as well as being in the military.
I was working for Schaeffer, got called up. So I got released for active duty. Came back and that was November of 2003. And I came back in August of 2005. And I worked here from August of 2005 till August of 2008. And then August of 2008 until October of 2011. I stayed on active duty even after I came back from Afghanistan.
What did your wife say about that? Did you get more house fixings done? Did you get more?
I did, actually. There was a lot. it was good. It was good for us, and it was good for our family. I wasn't stationed too far from here. I was home every other weekend, and I had leave and come home and hang out with the family and that. So it wasn't bad. And my wife will tell you, she goes, that's what he was built to do. And here it is, we're in the middle of this global war on terrorism, and he's built to do this, and they need him. So she was pretty cool with it. It didn't hurt also that was 08, 09 economic downturn. There was a lot of other things going on at that time. So it didn't hurt that I was doing that back here on Schaeffer's payroll. So, but when I came back in October of 11, actually I got a phone call from one of the owners, said, hey, if you're finished playing Army and you want your next job, you better get back because your boss is going to retire and we're going to make you vice president of tech. I said, okay. I said, well, I'll give them notice and let them know, and I'll revert back to reserve status. And fiscal year ended September, 1st of October, so I was able to, terminate my orders at that point. And then I went back on reserve status for my last few months until I retired in May of 2012. And so I came back to Schaeffer in October of 11, and the first thing they wanted me to do was build a grease plant expansion. So I got to project manage that. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, so that must have always been like a home from home, right?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was out of the frying pan into the fire. I mean, it was just like all right, here we go.
Brilliant. And I guess fast forwarding a few years, it's as I said just before we hit record, the first time I saw you, I say saw you because we didn't get a chance to meet properly, was at the ILMA annual meeting 2025, just a couple of weeks ago at time of recording. What I'm always curious about this. What possesses you to take on a role when you're EVP of a very large organization? What possesses someone to then say, I'm going to give up more of my time to support the ILMA cause? I mean, congratulations, by the way. But where does that motivation come from?
Well, I put my money, I had to put my money where my mouth was. So several years ago, I was at an ILMA meeting, and I was just a participant. But I was complaining. Quite frankly, I was just grousing, and I said, kind of aggravates me and frustrates me that the OEMs have such a huge voice and influence on how oils are formulated, particularly on engine oils, and that if this continues, there won't be a differentiation available for engine oils, and that will only serve the majors, because then everybody's going to compete. Everybody's oil is going to be exactly the same, and you're only going to be able to compete on price. You can't compete on performance, and someone needs to stand up and be a voice. And so someone said, well, get involved in ILMA. And I said, well, I guess I got to put my money where my mouth is. So then I was asked to join the board of directors, and I did. And then I was asked to take over the engine and transmission lube committee, and I did. I guess I did a good enough job. Again, no good deed goes unpunished. They said, hey, how about you join the executive committee? I was like, yeah, great. What does that mean? Well, that means you're going to be the secretary, and then the treasurer, and then the vice president, and the president for a year. I think you got to stick around 2 more years after that as the past president. So I thought about it for a few minutes. I said, yeah, okay, let's do it. So, yeah, that's
so now they've got you for the next.
Yeah,
they've got you for the next 3 years, right?
Yeah.
The world's leading lubricant-focused trade event comes to the Middle East this January. Lubricant Expo Middle East will take place from the 20th to 22nd of January at Festival Arena, Dubai Festival City in the UAE. With over 120 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and 1,500 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs and end users. It's an unmissable opportunity to meet and do business in this exciting region. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/ME for more information.
So what excites you most about taking the presidency at ILMA? What are you excited about achieving, looking forwards in this role?
Yeah, advocacy. I mean, I'm really, that's advocacy both with API, with the OEMs, and then advocacy, with state and federal government. Regulations are great, right? I mean, most regulations are put in place for a good purpose. We want to lower greenhouse gas emissions. We want to reduce the amount of waste going into landfills. We want to recycle plastic more. Those are all great and wonderful things we should all be working towards. The problem becomes when some boffin's sitting behind a desk and writes and decides this is the best way to do it. Well, it's not always the best way to do it. And a lot of times, the way the regulation's promulgated has a perverse effect. In other words, well, I know what the intent of this regulation is. Legally, I cannot comply and do this instead. No more waste is getting recycled. In fact, maybe more waste might be going into landfills. But according to the way the regulation's written, it's okay to do that. That's where the advocacy comes in. That's where it's important for our ILMA and other associations like us to get the comments in when regulations are being promulgated in order to make sure that the regulation is meeting the intent and still is something that can be accomplished and done by small businesses like ours, like Schaeffer. A huge corporation, they get a regulation like that. It's just like, okay, cost of doing business. It might be a fractional amount of cent per gallon that they'll have to charge for a gallon of fuel or quart of engine oil, whatnot. Whereas a smaller size company who doesn't have that economy of scale, that can be their margin. That cost to implement those regulations can take up all of their margin. People, when they write these regulations, need to understand that. They need to understand what is the impact to small businesses, what is the impact to the intent of the regulation. The only way to affect that is to have, vocal advocacy, participate in the comment period, write letters, engage with the attorneys. And that's what gets me excited about ILMA is that we are very proactive when it comes to that. We're very active in Washington, D.C. We're very active in the various states as they promulgate regulations to say, hey, look, we're all for the intent of the regulation. Let's just make sure the regulation is written in such a way that all of our members can comply and it meets the intent of the regulation.
Do you find that local, regional, national government are listening? Is it an easy conversation to have, or is it? Do you have to butt heads sometimes a little bit around that?
Sometimes, sometimes it's like, oh, okay, we didn't realize that. We've been successful on quite a few occasions on certain regulations, up to and including Kathy Nowak, who was she just retired. She was a Belanti Award winner. So when she was president, she actually testified before Congress regarding one of, I forget which one that was, but I think it had to do with an OSHA regulation that was being promulgated and what the impact of that regulation would be to small businesses. And again, everybody's, no one wants a worker to have a health detriment from working here. No one wants a worker to get injured, but does the regulation make sense? Is it meeting the intent, or is it putting unnecessary burdens on businesses that, don't necessarily meet the intent? And will there be a perverse effect? Well, look, I'm only affected if I have 50 employees and I got 52. All right, 3 of you guys don't work here tomorrow. All right, now I only have 49. I'm not subject to this regulation. There you go. So I mean, it has to make sense. It has to meet common sense. It has to meet the intent, and you have to be able to let people comply. Never write a rule or make a rule you can't enforce, right? So sometimes a lot of these regulations that are attempted to be promulgated are unenforceable, or they just don't make sense, or they want to change the laws of physics.
Yeah.
Well,
sometimes the rules that are handed down and not engaged
exactly.
with or consulted with the workforce and the coalface, if you like, can be
exactly
quite redundant. So, I mean, you mentioned around sustainability and the recycling. That's obviously playing a huge part in the industry now. Do you see it becoming an overburden of bureaucracy? Are businesses doing this anyway? Are they naturally becoming more sustainable? Does it need legislation and regulation from the top, or are they putting too much on you, do you think?
Well, that's a really good question. Again, no one's against the idea of sustainability. No one's against the idea of reducing the amount of waste that goes into waste streams, particularly that go to landfill. It would make much more sense for the packaging to be, recycled. Might make much more sense to use post-consumer waste in the packaging. Much more sense to reduce the amount of packaging. For instance, instead of selling 6 quarts of engine oil, put the 6-quart bag in a box, because then you have, a much smaller footprint, if you will, as far as waste. And oh, by the way, the paper, the box part is obviously recyclable and can decompose. The problem becomes in the writing of the regulation, where maybe that's not of benefit. In fact, maybe they're going to charge me the same amount for the bag in the box as they would for the 6 quarts, which doesn't really make sense. And so, when it comes to sustainability, there's always an economic benefit to doing that which is sustainable, right? It might not be upfront costs, but over the long haul, it's much more economically beneficial to do something that's sustainable than it is to do something that's not sustainable. The bag in the box is cheaper than 6 empty plastic quarts. So let's let the market, and if we want to incentivize the market to get people to go that direction, then by all means, we're all in favor of it. But don't promulgate a regulation that penalizes the guy that's using the 6, the bag in the box, and not penalizing the guys putting the 6 quarts of plastic in there. Make sure that the regulation incentivizes true sustainability and not some sort of just across the board, hey, you sold a gallon of oil, that's 56 cents, so boom,
Sometimes it feels like sustainability can become a bit of a like a box ticking word. It's like, yeah, we're sustainable. Like, some people really struggle to even define what it means. And I think
that's very true.
It's getting used everywhere. I don't think anyone really knows what it means. I assume it shows up more and more at Schaeffer. I assume sort of newer, younger talent are interested about sustainable business, sustainable future. It's certainly, I guess, something the industry needs to tell its story more around.
That's absolutely right. And I tell you what, this came up at UEIL last week. I guess for people who don't know, Union European Independent Lubricant Manufacturers, their Congress last week, and the president, Matea, made the comment, we don't get enough credit as a lubricant industry across the board. We don't get enough credit for reducing friction and therefore reducing energy. So in other words, if it takes 10 kilowatts to make a widget and you put in a higher performing fluid, you might be able to make that same widget for 8 kilowatts. Well, there's a 2 kilowatt savings of energy. I mean, now that has economic benefit to the manufacturer, but that also goes to sustainability. That's reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That's reducing energy requirement for use. And oh, by the way, if you're reducing that much energy, you're reducing friction within that machinery. That machinery is going to last longer. That goes to sustainability. And I don't think as a lubricant industry, we take enough credit for doing that. We don't tell that story well enough across the board. Everybody looks at lubricants and say, oh, that's not sustainable. That's oil out of the ground, old dinosaur juice. And, all you're doing is like slopping oil on hinges. And that's not the case at all. We probably haven't done a good enough job at telling that story yet. But it's certainly something that piqued my interest when UEIL brought that up. And it's something that I'm certainly going to communicate back to the ILMA leadership. It's something that we need to start looking at for this year and next.
Well, I think so. And it's good to hear that, UEIL speak more about it as well. And those that listen to the podcast often will know it comes up all the time. All the time. We need to tell a better story. It needs to be a story we tell for our next generation of talent, for the perception of the industry. I guess, Jim, and we're not going to fix the world here right now, are we? But But how do we start with that? Because it's a great concept. Yes, we need to tell a better story. Nice one. Who's going to champion it? Who's going to start, do you think?
It's like eating an elephant, right? One bite at a time. You got to start at the foot, don't end until you get to the tail. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is. We have to start. We've got to make a determination as an industry that this is a story that needs to be told. Now, ILMA started with the Friction Fighter campaign and the Move the World Forward, which is, that's great. But I don't know that translates well into the whole sustainability reduction of energy story that we need to be telling. And like I said, that's something that I'm going to take back and communicate back to ILMA. And I really believe that we can gain some traction there, and that, there's a story there for us to tell, and we should be telling it. We've got data. I know the data exists. I've seen it. So we've got a story. We have to package it. And we have to get it out there. We start having to beating that drum, right? Just boom, boom, boom. Every chance we get, we let people know, hey, do you know we reduce energy? When we reduce friction, we reduce energy. And if we start telling this story, we back it up with data, and we do a marketing campaign around it, I think maybe that will gain traction.
I agree. I agree. It's about time someone, I think, did something with it, because we could all see it as a challenge. We tried to do our bit around it by having conversations like this and sharing the message out like this. But yeah, it's either industry-wide or certainly organization level. Just start, as you say. It's
right,
like eating the elephant, one bite at a time.
That's it.
I guess there's no immediate tangible return on telling the story, is there? Again, it can be a bit of a buzzword, that, can't it? Let's tell a story. It's like, well, what is that? Yeah, so I do think it needs to be a decision, almost at industry level, to do, but see why we're doing it. What benefit for the future of the industry? For what benefit? Because I assume you've retired from the army, you've had the experience. You've probably not got decades more in your professional career. I'm trying to be polite here, Jim.
Wait a minute now.
What sort of advice would you give your younger self, just starting out in the industry? What advice would you give yourself?
Oh, well, really, I go back to, I knew about the mechanical side, right? I mean, obviously, I've been, elbow deep in torn down engines and transmissions and gearboxes and, all sorts of things. But I never understood what the components of a lubricant were. And I never understood the chemistry and what made the lubes do what they did. But what I started doing was, every time an additive vendor would come to Schaeffer, I'd sit in on the meetings. And I'd take the time and sit and listen, and I'd ask the questions. And so by doing that, aside from the books that I read, etc., I started to learn, so the sulfur and phosphorus react to form a sacrificial soap-like film, and that's what EP is. Okay, that makes sense now. Now I understand. And so I would say, if you were a mechanical side of the guy and you're coming in, learn the chemistry, right? It's not that hard, If you're a chemical side of the guy and you're coming in, learn the mechanics. Why does EP matter in a gearbox? Why does EP matter in a gearbox with brass or bronze? Why not have an EP in that gearbox matters drastically. The marriage of those two, the chemical and the mechanical, that would be where I would focus, going back. And regardless of what side, if you're a tech guy coming in, tech gal coming in, regardless of what side you're coming from, degree in chemistry, degree in mechanical engineering, we're on the other side, because there's two sides of this lubrication story. Yeah, one is the chemistry of the lubricant, but the other, the story about the components that you're lubricating, what they do, how they work, and why the chemistry works the way it does and why it's beneficial. If you understand both sides of that, then all of a sudden you can start asking questions, going back to your initial question about, precision engineering versus kind of creative, whatever. If you understand both sides, then you can kind of like sit back and scratch your head and say, well, what would happen if we did this? And, that question, what would happen if we do this? What's going to happen if I put this toaster back together and plug it in? Do I know where the fuses are? That level of innovation is what's going to be required to continue to move the lubricant industry forward. We can't depend on just the additive companies doing that research. We've got to do it at the independent level, both at UEIL and ILMA. We've got to ask the questions. What's going to happen if I do this? What will this do? What will this affect? What if I took this fatty acid, this tallow, and I added it to a polyalkylene glycol? What would that do in a warm gearbox? Those are the kind of questions that we need to ask ourselves, but we need to have a fundamental understanding of both the chemistry side and the mechanical side in order to do that. But once we do that, we start asking those questions, and if we've got the top cover to fail, because you're going to have to fail a couple times in order to learn, we can be innovative, and we can continue to innovate, and we can continue to put really great lubes out there that are sustainable and help, solve a lot of energy and mechanical problems.
Well, thank you for such a in-depth answer. And I think there's a lot of connection back there to little Jim as well, to young Jim fixing the toaster. What would happen if, hey, I think that's...
Make sure you got a fuse. Make sure you know where the fuse box are and you got a spare fuse. Because you don't, the hardware store is not open and mom and dad come home and the lights aren't on, you're really in trouble.
I think, there's the what would happen if piece. I think that's a real... For me, that's how I try and approach things. It's the curiosity. What would happen if? We're met so often in life, aren't we? With you can't do that. You can't do that. That'll never work. So, what about if it does? Let's just have a go and see, and let's not be afraid to try and afraid to be curious. And I really like that. If you're coming from this side of the coin, learn the other.
Right.
I think it's a really important piece to underline. The sort of approach to always learning. You've never completed everything. No one knows everything, so keep learning. I think it's a really important point for the next generation as you leave the industry behind in I don't know how many years, several more years, Jim. Hopefully. I guess on that note, finally, Jim, what is next for you? Obviously you've taken on ILMA, your EVP at Schaeffer. What's next in terms of leadership? I guess looking back at legacy, what do you want to leave behind? Just tell me about that. What's next for you?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I've never really thought of it. I don't think in those terms. I think of what's next. Like you said, I really gotten involved, and I've taken some online classes from Stanford on strategic planning. And so I'm kind of fascinated with that right now. And I've been really looking at that, reading a lot of books about that, talk to Jana Wilkinson from Klein all the time about that. Her and I are we nerd out in the back of the bus and, talk about that. So I think that's probably the next, that's the next thing is I'll continue on in some endeavor, hopefully within the lubricant industry, but, strategic planning, asking the question, what do we need to do to stay relevant? What can we do to compete? How do we capture value? How do we create value? That's probably my next step.
Yeah, something tells me you're never going to stop. You're never going to think, I'm just going to retire and build furniture. I don't think that's going to happen.
No, I've got a half day scheduled for my funeral, so yeah, I don't plan on stopping.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? It's like I was chatting the other week to someone who said, "When do you plan to retire?" It's like, well, I don't really want to. I mean, I'm only 41 now. Don't get me wrong. So I'm a few years away anyway, even if I was. But I'm very much. It's a bit cliche, isn't it? But if you love what you're doing, then what's the intention to stop? Just keep going.
Yeah. I would aggravate my wife to no end if all I did was hunt and fish, right? Which is what I would do if I was totally retired and had nothing else to do. So I don't want to aggravate her because, she's put up with a lot. She acts like she likes me. So I'm probably just going to keep doing something.
Yeah, exactly. Keep yourself busy. Well, Jim, I know ILMA's very fortunate to have you as their president. I think, getting to know you here for the past 40 or 45 minutes or so. It's been a pleasure. I'm really looking forward to what this year brings for you and ILMA moving forward, and obviously Schaeffer as well. Please do, just before we leave, tell the folks listening how we can connect with you. How can we find out the work that you're doing for ILMA, or find out more about Schaeffer? Where can we find you, Jim?
Well, Schaeffer, www.schaefferoil, SCHAEFFEROIL.com. That's our website. There's some videos on there. It talks about our history. If you're like you want to see the history of a company as it grew up as the U.S. expanded through the West. Really interesting. One of the videos Wells Fargo Bank did for us. So that, more than welcome to take a look at that. I am on LinkedIn, and I do pass on information on LinkedIn. And ILMA also has a pretty good LinkedIn presence, as well as they're on TikTok. I'm not.
Brilliant. Jim, it's been a pleasure to chat. Thank you for taking time out of your day. I really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to catching up with you again very soon.
All right, thanks.
The world's leading lubricants-focused trade event comes to the Middle East this January. Lubricant Expo Middle East will take place from the 20th to 22nd of January at Festival Arena, Dubai Festival City in the UAE. With over 120 exhibitors covering the entire lubricant value chain and 1,500 visitors, including industry leaders, OEMs, and end users. It's an unmissable opportunity to meet and do business in this exciting region. Register now to attend for free. Head to lubricantexpo.com/ME for more information.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Blend. Be sure to follow us to catch next and future episodes as we continue to explore the people within the lubricant market.